say, the more and more I learn about this, the more inspired I am and in awe of what you've done. It's incredible, absolutely incredible. It's my great pleasure next to introduce the Honourable Dr. Mehreen Faruqi. Dr. Faruqi is a Greens MP in the New South Wales Parliament. Born in Pakistan, Dr. Faruqi completed a Bachelor of Civil Engineering in Lahore, Pakistan, before immigrating to Australia in 1992. She was awarded her Masters and PhD in Environmental Engineering from the University of New South Wales and has worked in an array of leadership positions in local government, consulting firms, and at higher education institutions in Australia and internationally. When she was elected to the New South Wales Parliament in 2013, she became the first Muslim woman to be a member of any Australian Parliament. In Parliament, Dr. Faruqi has been a strong advocate for women and women's rights, introducing the first ever parliamentary bill to decriminalise abortion in June 2014. It's my great pleasure to introduce the most inspiring woman, Dr. Mehreen Faruqi.
Good evening, everyone. I'll start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on, the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past and present. As you all know, this land was never ceded. It always has been and always will be Aboriginal land. I'd also like to acknowledge Her Excellency, Dr. Naila Chauhan, High Commissioner of Pakistan, as well as the Vice Consul, Bushra Islam. Welcome to New South Wales Parliament. Of course, it's my house and my home on the days Parliament is sitting. We were here till 2 a.m. every night last week. But more importantly, welcome to your house, the House of the People of New South Wales. Thank you, Francis, for organising this really important event today, and to Dr. Alina Shah and Ms. Javeria Sohail from Peshawar for joining us. But also, thank you for your courage to actually start this initiative and your spirit of collaboration to start a project which is thousands of miles apart, really, from where you all live. And it is such a great example of how you can actually overcome the tyranny of distance when there is a strong will and a strong leadership to change the world, to address injustice, inequality, and to stand up for human rights. And I think it's probably apt to recognize that after the brutal and horrific events of last week, especially in Paris and in Beirut, there is no better time to talk about peace, as our thoughts and our hearts go out to the friends, families, and the loved ones who have faced such terrible terror recently. And sadly, the people of Peshawar are all too familiar with such horror and attacks since, already discussed. Just last year, 141 people, mainly innocent children, were held hostage and mercilessly killed in a school in Peshawar. Such difficult times are also moments when our humanity is challenged. And we must meet these challenges by not falling for what the terrorists actually want: division, fear, and further war, but to stand united and to explore ways towards long-lasting peace and harmony. And let's not forget that conflict and war does affect women and girls much more disproportionately and further undermines their rights in countries where they're already quite precarious. And of course, many of you know that I grew up in Pakistan, and I must say that I am feeling a little bit nostalgic and homesick tonight. But before I go on, I must acknowledge the Honourable Mark Pearson, who's a member of the Upper House from the Australian Justice Party. Welcome, Mark. And I have very fond memories of Peshawar from my childhood because we often used to go there almost every year actually and enjoyed the amazing hospitality that Francis spoke about. And of course, the wonderful, wonderful food. Who can forget the chapli kebab of Peshawar? Yeah, a few nodding heads there. And Pakistan is indeed, as you've heard already, one of the lowest ranked countries when it comes to gender equality. Gender discrimination does prevent women from accessing education, healthcare, and work opportunities. And they do suffer the heinous scourge of sexual assault and domestic violence. It is also a country struggling with poverty, terrorism, and political instability. So within this context, I was actually one of the very few lucky girls and women who grew up under the guidance of a very strong feminist aunt and a father who strongly believed in equality and education for all. He was actually a teacher himself, And in Pakistan, there's kind of a general saying which says that you respect your mother and father most, but after that, the most respected person in your life has to be your teacher. So it was no surprise that I ended up studying and practicing civil engineering, an extremely male-dominated profession in a patriarchal society. Egged on by my father, I chose it precisely because it was a non-traditional profession for women. And my dad's thinking was that whether I took up a job or not, whether it became my profession later on or not, wasn't really important. But what was needed was to be educated well, so you could actually grow your mind and your intellect. You could actually think critically, and you could actually have an open mind and challenge things at face value, and challenge the status quo. As a Greens MP, I have a responsibility for 11 portfolios for the Greens, and it does include transport and environment and status of women, animal welfare, young people, multiculturalism, etc., etc. And I half-jokingly sometimes say that there are only two reasons why I'm able to fulfill my responsibilities in all these areas. One, because I'm an engineer, and I was actually trained to think in a very structured and critical way. And two, that I'm a woman, and we all know that women can do many things at the same time. But if you really want to see an example of an extremely dynamic mix of education and women from Pakistan, you look no further than Her Excellency Naila Chauhan. And it is a real special treat to welcome you today in New South Wales Parliament, Naila. However, the choice to be educated or not is not available to the vast majority of girls and women in Pakistan, both at a primary level and at a higher education level. The harsh day-to-day reality of poverty means going without food, sleeping in extreme heat or extreme cold, having no clean water or sanitation. It means disease and premature death. And it also means not getting the opportunity to read or write. And as I said earlier, not only does war and conflict impact women and girls more, but also the gendered impacts of climate change are numerous and further magnified for women living in poorer countries, where, for example, it is the women and girls who are responsible for bearing the burden of collecting water and fuel to meet their families' needs. And as impacts of climate change take hold, collecting water and firewood is getting harder and harder. So they do have to search much further afield. And because of much more time spent fulfilling these responsibilities, women have less time to earn money, engage in politics, or be part of decision making, or of course, go to school and be educated. And this perpetuates a cycle of disempowerment and social injustice. Living in Pakistan, though, I always imagined countries like Australia having achieved gender equality in all spheres of life. And yes, things are quite different in both countries, but in Australia, we're not just yet equal. And this was brought home to me quite strongly just recently when a Pakistani woman visiting Sydney said to me how backwards Australia was on gender equality. She was visiting Pakistan as a part of a Depilex Smile Again Foundation's delegation to highlight the alarming level of domestic violence in Pakistan, and especially the horrendous and brutal acid attacks that many women in Pakistan suffer. And she gave me a litany of reasons of why she thought so, and that included high rates of domestic violence in Australia, the increasing gender pay gap, and especially the sexism surrounding the departure of the first woman Prime Minister of Australia, Julia Gillard. Initially, I must say I was quite a bit taken aback by her saying, Australia was so backward in gender equality. But I do recognize that what she was saying is true. And despite the many challenges women in South Asia face, they have been at the forefront when it comes to political leadership. While the United States still awaits the prospect of a woman president, and Australia only elected their first woman president in 2010, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh have all elected women prime ministers decades ago, and now Nepal has a woman prime minister as well. And I'm raising these comparisons not to be disparaging of Australia or indeed Pakistan, but to highlight the point that perception is not always reality, and the idea that developed and richer countries always know what's best is not a constructive way of solving problems. Addressing inequality and injustice is about learning from each other and working together without any notions of superiority or inferiority. And that's why the Peshawar School of Peace is such an important step forward. It came out of a chance meeting between Francis and some Pakistani students on public transport and has now blossomed into a partnership for advancing the rights of girls. I think what matters most going forward is this purposeful solidarity that Francis and others involved in this project have shown to help each other narrow and hopefully eliminate gaps in education, opportunity, rights, and resources. And to be able to do this, we actually need genuine grassroots partnerships where inequality is viewed through a variety of lenses, not just seen through one set of eyes, where we connect with and listen to each other with open minds, letting go of preconceived notions of who's right, who's wrong, who's good, and who's bad. I think the incredible poet Rumi said it best when he said, "Out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." Thanks, Francis, for meeting us in that field.